Welcome to Ask ALLi, the self-publishing advice podcast from the Alliance of Independent Authors. This week it's our monthly members Q&A, where ALLi members have their most pressing publishing questions analyzed and answered. Our members Q&A podcast stream is proudly sponsored by Book Vault. Sell high-quality print-on-demand books directly to readers worldwide and earn maximum royalties selling directly. Automate fulfillment and create stunning special editions with Book Vault Bespoke. Visit bookvault.app today for an instant quote. And here are your hosts for the members Q&A, Michael Ronn and Sacha Black.
Hello, and welcome to Self-Publishing with ALLi, the podcast where we answer your burning self-publishing questions. You've got the questions. We have the answers, or at least Sacha has the answers. I just asked the questions to Sacha. How are you, Sacha?
Hey, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I am fantastic. It is it's a beautiful day outside. It's actually stormy.
Oh, I actually love a thunderstorm, though. Yeah,
I know. Yeah, people think I'm crazy when I say it's a beautiful day, and they're like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, "Well, you're just not on my frequency. You're not in my groove. If stormy day is not your idea of a good time."
I'm British, and all British people love talking about the weather, no matter what the weather is. We do thoroughly enjoy a good chinwag about the weather, and one of my favourites is also thunderstorms. What I hate, though, is snow.
Yeah. Oh, I love snow. I love snow, too. I live in Iowa, so, yeah, we get pretty snowy winters, and it's fun to go outside and play and make snow angels, and like it's also fun to like sit. It's nice when you don't have to go anywhere. When you have to go somewhere, then it's just a drag. But
the only time I think snow is acceptable is if I'm skiing on it.
All right, that's acceptable. I can see that. I can see that. Yeah, I just like winter just because of the clothes and layering and cozy
warm
hot
fires
chocolate,
and
all
books
that good stuff.
and
Books and it just has a certain personality about it. But all right, so we got some questions. We have a decent number of questions today, and our first question comes from Jay, and Jay asks, "How long does it usually take a designer to create a cover design, and should they read the book to get a good idea for the design?"
No, it is not their responsibility to read the book. That's the first answer. Your brief needs to be comprehensive enough that they don't need to read the book. And also that is why it's really important that you do your research and you understand market conventions and tropes for covers. Like a designer is the artist who has the skills to create any kind of cover, more or less. Obviously, there are some certain types, like particularly illustrated ones, that like a designer may or may not have the skill set to do that. But broadly speaking, if you're talking about an average cover, most designers would be able to do most genres. What they often choose to do is specialize in a couple of genres, but not always. So because of that, it then becomes your responsibility to understand the genre conventions down to a really kind of micro level. They will understand broad brush, like the right fonts to use for particular genres. They'll understand, colorings for particular genres, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't know it. You should have like a set of, maybe 5 to 15 different comparison covers that you would want your cover to look like it fit in with. And then most designers will give you a set of questions that they want you to answer. Some won't. But it's things like giving them comparison covers, understanding the types of font that you want. Do you want a photograph background? Do you want an illustrated background? Do you want for want of a better word, because I can't think of the right word right now, but like clip art. It's not clip art, obviously, but you know what I mean, where you
stock art.
Like stock art. Thank you.
Stock photos.
Yeah. Exactly. Do you want like a handsome man with all the muscles and the torso on your cover, or do you want an object-based cover? All of these things are the things that you need to know. Do you want your name at the bottom, at the top? Are you not bothered? Do you want to evoke a certain scene? Is there a certain mood that you need to evoke within your genre? All of these different things are bits of information that you should be putting in. Red lines as well. Are there particular things things you really want to stay away from in your genre, or stay away from like on the cover, or a particular color that you don't want on your cover. All of these things are information that are useful. Even things like, are there certain covers in your genre that you really dislike? Well, put those in your brief as well and say, I really don't like these, but I do love these, like, so that the designer has all of that information. And then in terms of how long does it take, that is like asking how long is a piece of string, because I have had designers take the brief 3 weeks in advance, 2 days in advance, 2 months in advance, and then some of them turn the whole process around in a week. Some of them it has protracted over 2 or 3 months. Some one designer, the very first designer I ever worked mostly with traditional publishers, and it took a year, 1 whole year for one cover. It was insane. One thing that I would do is that I would ask the designer of their general time frame, like once you start work with them, how long can it expect to last, and then you can put that into your schedule. And it might also be like we just worked with a designer for the Kickstarter. This designer is now booked up until like February or March next year. So, you know, some designers get really, really booked up in advance, but then that designer in particular is extremely fast. Once you then come on, we are the primary client and the work is done within a week. But then, you know, I worked with another designer in January and it took almost 2.5 months to get the cover sorted. But, you know, it just depends on how closely aligned they are with your vision, like how many iterations you want, like how fussy you are, you know, so there's a lot of that's a big question to answer.
Yeah, I think we should spend some more time on this, because this is a big question. I think half the battle is just getting on the calendar.
Yes, I agree.
Like that's half the battle. And then, like you said, once they start working on it, it's amazing how fast they typically are. There are a few things you said that I wanted to talk about as well. So, like when it comes to the designer's expertise, you're right. Most designers do everything, but they have a specialty in a couple of genres. I think you want to find the designer that has the specialty that you're looking for, if you can, and if that's within your budget. I think one of the issues that I've run into is just because a cover designer can do fantasy, that doesn't mean that that's actually in their wheelhouse. They may not understand the really deep nuances. And yeah, it is your responsibility to provide information to the designer. But I think that's also where authors can go wrong, because they, one, provide too much information to the designer and then they get confused. And then two, they don't provide the right information, or they don't understand specifically what they're looking for. So like I'll give you my first couple of covers as an example. Like I gave my designer paragraphs and paragraphs about what the book was about. And I wanted to see this, I wanted to see this type of person on the cover, and I wanted them to be holding this type of object, and I wanted the object to be tilted a little bit in their hand so that the light fell on it just the right way. And then I wanted like a certain background, and then I wanted the moon to be in the sky. I mean, you cannot go that granular. It's just too much. I think the focus, the main thing you want to be communicating to your designer is clarity. Like you want to understand the nuances as much as possible, but you have to come up to the surface level as well, because I think we can get way too into the details, whereas the designer is really just looking at like subconscious first impression stuff, right? So I don't know. For me, I just think it's important. We have to understand the nuances, but you also have to be able to communicate at a high level. And that's something that just comes with time. I didn't get it right the first probably 10 covers that I did. But once it started clicking, like, you understand how to communicate with the designer. You understand what to tell them. And sometimes telling them, like having some restraint in what you tell them, gives them the artistic ability to do what they need to do. But what do you think, Sacha?
Oh, yeah, no, I agree. I think that when you go to the designers who are really specialized in a niche, I think you need to expect a significantly higher price tag. So it's about finding that blend, like where is the line between they've got a certain skill set. I feel like Liam Nielsen saying that, but they've got a certain skill set, and but also they're not so highly priced. So maybe, I don't know. I just think when I've looked for particular cover designers who are really kind of hyper niche in their skill set, those tend to be the most expensive covers. But yes, I agree. It's a little bit like going to a tattooist. Right? Like I'm in the middle of getting a leg sleeve. So this is kind of my current experience. You have to tell them what you want. But if they are an artist with a particular style, you also have to give them the freedom to create art, because that's what a cover is. And it's, like you can't just dictate every minute detail of what this tattoo looks like, because it loses the flavor of their skill set and their type of art. And that's the same thing with a cover designer, I think. Like you have to give them, like a high level strategic plan of what you want for the cover, rather than a 15,000 word outline.
Yeah, exactly. And you have to find, we always talk about finding the intersection of art and commerce. I think you have to find the intersection between your vision and the artist's freedom. And I think when you figure that out, then good things happen. And when you tilt too far in the either direction, that's when things usually go off the rails. At least that's how it's been for me. And yeah, I would just say, it's an art, just like cover art is an art. Okay, the next question is from Ty, and Ty asks, should authors create their own wiki page? If so, when should they start creating it?
Why?
Yeah, I've got some experience with this one. So wiki pages, okay, so just to give some context, there are authors out there that create wikis for their series. So for example, if you've got, I just use Game of Thrones as an example, because that is a really good example of a series that needs a wiki. It's when you got a lot of details, a lot of characters, a lot of worlds, and it's difficult maybe to keep them straight. And you want some sort of resource for your readers to be able to do that. And you also want some level of fan ownership in your work as well, because maybe you don't want to manage it, but maybe it's something that your fans can manage.
Is this like a Wikipedia page?
Yeah, it's like a Wikipedia page. But it's a series of interconnected pages. So like every character would have their own page. Every world, every setting would have its own page.
Okay,
significant objects, things like that.
Do you think it's worthwhile doing?
I haven't found it to be worthwhile personally. I was approached a couple of times by a couple of different organizations that wanted to build me one, and basically how it worked is they would build the wiki and then they would hand it over to me, and then I would hand it over to my fans, essentially, or hand it over to like a moderator, and then they would kind of build the Bible of everything as I wrote it. I just didn't. I don't know. It just didn't feel right to me at the time. My series weren't big enough to command a wiki. I mean, maybe if I was selling, 7 figures and, that sort of thing, or, I had a series that just absolutely blew up, but it just didn't feel right to me at the time. But I know some people have done it. And if you've got a really, really engaged fan base, and you have the time and the energy to manage it yourself, because basically it's like a new website. It's something you're going to have to manage, and you have to make sure it's up to date. I just didn't have the time to do it. It's a particular flavor that just wasn't hitting my palate at the time.
I would ask, who is using Wikipedia, and why? So the reason I ask this is because, do you know who your readers are? because Wikipedia is very much used by a certain generation of people, and not
it's not a Wikipedia. It's like Wikipedia, but it's think of it like a self-contained Wikipedia that you own. Like it's just like you own it. You have your own domain. You own it, but it functions like Wikipedia, but it exists solely for you in your books.
Okay, so you'd have to direct traffic there. Yeah, see, that's where I lose interest, because I'm like, why would you direct traffic anywhere other than to a sales page? Like, just seems like like if you're going to own and host a website, why would you not then just own and host information on your own website? I think it would depend what genre you also write in. Like maybe if you write in some, like Game of Thrones, epic fantasy style genre, maybe it would be worth it and that would be what the fans would want. But for me, certainly as a romance writer, they don't care about stuff like that. They just want to know when the next book is coming, like it's not like it. To me, it would seem like a fruitless exercise, though I say that, and I have had a couple of people ask me to write a book just of the world building, but I think it comes when you reach a certain point, and you have a certain complexity. Like I just don't think 99% of authors would find any use for it. Why would you drive anybody anywhere other than to a sales page is my question.
Well, I think this is beyond the sales page. I mean, this is something that you do to engage your fans. So I think sales is the least of your concerns it should be the least of your concerns at the point that you build a wiki.
Right, because you're already selling a buttload of
you should be selling a ton of books, and your readers should be crazy about it, to the point where I feel like if this is something that you need, you'll know. Like it will find you. But for most people, it's probably not worth it. Your time and money could be spent doing other things.
Yeah.
Okay. Next question is from Frank. I am producing my first audiobook this year, and I'd like to distribute it widely. First, do I need an ISBN, and which distribution platform should I use?
So you will need an ISBN, and I would use Findaway Voices and Spotify and ACX and your own website.
Yeah.
It's probably the ones that I would use.
Agreed. Yeah, I think you don't have to do an ISBN if you go through ACX only for exclusive, but that's not the question.
Yeah.
So yeah, you do need an ISBN. And in fact, I think you need two ISBNs. You need a regular ISBN and one for the libraries. I think you can get away with using the same one for both, but I've just always used two. I don't know, just feels right to me to use two. But so you may want to do your research on whether you want to do that. But yeah, both. Yeah, if you, that's what I would do too. I would do ACX as a non-exclusive, Findaway Voices, Spotify, and then your website. And then there was a follow-up question that Frank asked. I read recently, how long does it take for your audiobook to show up once you have hit the publish button?
That depends on the platform that you're talking about. So if you use your website with BookFunnel, it will be there immediately.
Couple minutes.
Well, more or less immediately. They take a few hours to process. Yeah. It's actually it can be a few hours depending on how long the audiobook is. But it's not very long. And then with Audible, it can take a few weeks. Like it just depends how busy they are, what their backlog is. I had one go through Podium recently, and I think it was about 2.5 weeks it took for it to show up, maybe even 3. But it's not always that long. It just kind of, like, sometimes you can be really lucky and it can be like a couple days.
It depends on if you have
other times it can be a few weeks.
So like I've gone through a publisher for my audio to get onto Audible and all the different places, and it took like 2 or 3 weeks. But when I publish a book on Audible, it takes like a week.
Yeah.
So yeah, it just kind of depends. And then Findaway, it has all sorts of different retailers and stuff, and it feels like, you get an email that tells you, hey, it's been published on a bunch of different places. And then like months later, it'll finally make its way onto Hoopla or some other place that, it takes a while to get it into. So yeah, I would say most major retailers would be a couple of weeks. Yeah. So question, this is just more of I think a question that would be beneficial to hear from you for the audience, Sacha. How do you plan audio release dates? Do you release your book, your audio books at the same time as your print and ebook, or do you do them separately?
That's a great question. So up until now, everything has been staggered release. So I do the ebook, the hardback and the paperback all on the same day. And then we do special editions differently. And then we do the audiobook later. Now, what we're trying to work towards is simultaneous release. So for the book that I'm releasing in September, it won't be simultaneous release, and that's on me because I haven't finished the book yet. So that's my fault. But we have a book releasing in December that is going to be simultaneous release. And the way that I have done that is basically I just finished the book further in advance of the deadline of the release date. And I've already handed it to the to Podium, who are publishing it. So they've got enough time. But, you need like 6 months really in advance of a release in order to be able to do that, because you have to get into the narrator's booking schedules. If you've got more than one narrator, you've got to get into more than one diary. You've then got to leave enough time for post-production within the publisher. Then you've got to, they've got to master all the files, get it uploaded, all of this kind of stuff. So December's the first one that we're doing that's simultaneous release. And certainly for the books going forward next year, we are going to try for simultaneous release. But so I think the book in September will be the last one that isn't. But the only way to do that is to finish the books and give yourself a longer lead time. Almost like traditional publishing does that. Almost like I'm learning why it's really good to have long lead times. Well,
it's like they
much
say,
as I hate to admit that.
What Dean Lester Smith says all the time, think like a publisher, right? And so sometimes, even though we're self-published, sometimes there are things that traditional publishers do, and they do it for a reason. And, sometimes that helps. I think, most people, staggered releases probably make the most sense. The benefit of a staggered release is that you get to do technically 2 releases, right? So when the audio comes out, you can kind of re-release it. You can kind of treat it like a separate launch, and you can let people know about it who maybe didn't know about it before. So, simultaneous release, I think, is the holy grail. But just because you don't do a simultaneous release, I still think there are good opportunities.
Yeah, and I would talk to your narrators as well, because lots of even if you are traditionally publishing your audio, talk to the narrators, because they are really starting to get quite savvy with social media, with narrating live, like all kinds of stuff. So, there are lots of ways and means that you can market your book with narrators. Not all narrators are like it, but some really are starting to get very, very savvy.
Okay. I'm going to have to summarize this without getting into the details. So just bear with me, guys, as I do this. So the question is from Joyce. And Joyce asks about a developmental editor because she's got a book with subject matter that is quite heavy. And it's something that it's been a significant project for her. It's a very detailed subject matter related to religion, world leaders, that sort of thing. And she wants to know, where is the best place, or how do you find a developmental editor that can work with you when you've got a book that is very, very detailed, well-researched, very specific? Are there specific types of developmental editors that can help you with this, or, where does one start?
What I would say is a couple of things. I would consider pitching this to trad, and I don't say that often, but I think there would be some academic presses, some quite niche nonfiction presses that would be interested. There are a few books that I can think of in the market that are kind of adjacent to this, that are traditionally published, that I think you would find a better, more comprehensive editorial experience from by going through trad. Now, that's not to say you can get it into trad, like it's going to be quite a thing. I would probably work on a synopsis and try and work on it that way and go through trad. So that's one thing you could do. The other thing that I would consider is like a left field attack. Because this is so hyper niche, I cannot imagine that there is a developmental editor that would specialize in this that doesn't work for a trad pub house. That's just like straight up, I think you're gonna struggle to find somebody. Now, you could go to a nonfiction developmental editor in general. I think my question would be, is this a memoir? Like, have you written this as a memoir under this topic? And if so, maybe find a memoir developmental editor. So that would be another question, or another angle to come at. And then the other thing that I would do is there are going to be subject area specialists in the industry, right? Like I can see that there's a couple of industries that you track across, and there will be subject area experts. So I would genuinely reach out to some of them and just see whether or not you could maybe pay them for a consult or pay them for a little bit of their time, or if they would be willing to, I don't know, like I just think that you are not going to find a nonfiction editor that is this specialized. Or if you are, it's like one in the world, and finding them is going to be like a needle in a haystack. So you could reach out to those subject experts and ask them who their editors were. That might be something to do. The other thing that you could do is look in books that are similar. Like, so are there other books on the market? And don't say no, there are none, because like, I have read The Message. I know there are books out there that are adjacent, if not, under the same. I really struggle when people say there's no book like mine. Of course there is. But yeah, so I would go and look at who edited those books. Look in the copyright information. Sometimes it will be a traditional publishing house. Sometimes it might not be. But go and see if they've quoted their editors. Like, that is one way for you to find people. But I genuinely think this is more of a networking issue than it is anything else. Like, and if you can network well enough, you will find somebody to edit. And it might be that you cannot get a developmental editor. It might be that you have to have maybe readers of the genre provide some feedback, and then you have like more of a line edit or a proof edit on this, rather than it being a developmental editor with that subject specialism. Like, I think you have to think left and right field, get the feedback where you can, or go to a generalized nonfiction person. But I even think with this level of specificity, they're not going to be able to edit for content knowledge, if that makes sense. They're only going to be able to edit for readability, accessibility from a lay person's perspective. So, for example, my dad has a really deep subject knowledge, sort of left of field of what this person's talking about, and he wants to write a book, and I'm like, and he's like, oh, can't you like ghostwrite it, or can't you edit it for me? And I'm like, no, because I don't have enough knowledge to know if the content of the sentences that you are saying is correct or not. So I couldn't give you an edit in the way that you would want an edit. Like, that is where, yeah, you kind of have to go left and right field, I would say. That's a really tricky one.
The book is about it looks like spirituality, world leaders, dark forces, things like that. So I agree with everything you said, Sacha. It's rare that we get questions. We always get questions about developmental editing for fiction, but I don't think I've ever gotten a question on this show about developmental editing for nonfiction. I have some polarizing opinions about developmental editing, but I think in this case, I think it makes sense if you're wanting to make sure that the book flows. But I don't think you're going to find. I mean, I think any developmental editor could probably work with you on this, because ultimately it's not so much that they're going to be looking at the subject matter content. I think you to your point, Sacha, I think you have to get that expertise wherever you can get it, probably through beta readers. Would probably, I think, be a better way to approach it. But they can at least help you from a structural perspective. Does this flow? Is the way you've laid it out make sense? Structurally, I think they could potentially help you with that. And I think you could probably, as long as you find a good developmental editor, period, then I think you probably could find somebody to help you help you with it. But I think for the subject matter expertise, I think beta readers would be better. I think if you found paid beta readers, this topic, I think you could probably find people that are very passionate about it and who probably know something about it, maybe not everything, but it could at least have a conversation with you about it. I think I would go that route. I think you'll have a much easier time posing questions to beta readers. I think you'll get better results too. Okay, next question is from Janice, and the question is, okay, so this is an interesting question. How can I publish my book through a foreign entity safely? Which companies provide that service? And since printing costs have skyrocketed, my net profit is minimal. Is this a good idea? I have been burned in the past by a U.S. publisher. So I guess we're not clear on why you need to publish the book through a foreign entity, but we know that this member is not American, and presumably they live in a country that they need to be able to, they can't publish directly for whatever reason. Those are just some assumptions, so we can start there.
So what do they mean publish through a foreign entity?
That's what I think.
Like as in
a
publisher? So I would...
No,
do they
don't
have an
any
agent?
Details on it.
Okay, so then maybe they would be able to protect themselves more if they had an agent working for them, because agents will only work with legitimate publishers, and they tend to have networks and co-agents, I think they call them in other countries and things. So that would be one option. Another option would be to spend some time doing some research on other books that are like yours that have been published by foreign publishers. Like, just check on Amazon, for want of a better platform. That's the one that's got the most books on it. So I would just go and have a look on there and look for the German translations or the French translations or the Spanish translations, and just look at which publishers have published them. And then the other thing that I would then go and do is go and look on their websites. How do they look for new acquisitions? Like, you could potentially go to some rights fairs. There's the Frankfurt Fair, there's the
Sharjah. Yeah, I think that's in
you've been to that one, haven't you?
Yeah, it's in the Middle East.
Yeah, that one.
I think it's in the Emirates.
Yeah, so there's that one. Yeah, so you could, there are lots of different rights fairs, but often these fairs you actually have to set up the meetings before you go. So I think it's just an exercise in reaching out to the right people and doing your research and looking at which publishers are publishing what, and probably not picking.
Yeah, and I think we should also take a step back. There's a lot we don't know about this question. I think we start at the basics.
Yeah.
Why do you need to go through a publisher or a foreign entity to publish your books? Is it truly a geographical thing that you can't? Because there are some countries in the world where you can't publish through KDP, for example, right? And so they have to go through. I don't know.
Isn't India one of them?
I'm not going to name any countries because I don't know for sure, but I know that there have been off. That's one reason why Draft to Digital is alluring, because internationally there are some authors that's their only option. So what I would say is, are you in that boat? If you're not in that boat, then I don't think you need to publish through a foreign entity. That doesn't make any sense. Just learn self-publishing or either go traditional publishing. Look into hybrid publishing if that's something you're interested in. Go to our Watchdog database. Look for reputable companies. But if you truly need an intermediary, then I think what you said, Sacha, makes a lot of sense. But you have to be really careful anytime you're publishing through another party. If you're using like a vendor like Draft to Digital or Findaway Voices, right? These are companies that work all the time with indies. They don't take your rights. They're reputable. They're good to do business with, and you don't have anything to worry about. Which is why I just if you're not in that situation, then that's why I would recommend that people do. But if you want to write in with some additional information regarding your question, Joyce, we would be happy to flesh it out a little bit further. You can write us at info@allianceindependentauthors.org. Okay. Next question is, where is the watchdog list? I'm trying to find a list of approved services, and I can't remember where it is. This is from member Lorelei. So if you go to selfpublishingadvice.org/ratings, that will take you to our watchdog list of approved or rated services. So selfpublishingadvice.org/ratings. Now we do have, and I don't think we spotlight this enough. It's kind of the ratings directory's little brother. We do have an awards and contests ratings as well. I want to make sure people know that because we haven't talked about that much. But our watchdog, John, he does a really great job vetting service providers, and that is the bread and butter of what he typically does. But he also rates awards as well. So if you go to selfpublishingadvice.org, we also have the best and it's best and worst, but it's like award ratings. So it is called book award and contest rating. So if, for example, you get approached by somebody that says, "Hey, you've won this award, congratulations," or "Hey, you need to pay £50 to submit to this award, and you're not quite sure. Alarm bells are going off. You're not sure what to do." Go to that page. It's free. It's open to the public, and take a look and see what our watchdog says. And we've got some that are in the database that are great and recommended. We've got others that are caution, and we have others that don't touch them with a 10-foot pole. But just don't. We just want to make sure people are aware that that's out there. Okay. And this is our final question, Sacha, for this session. And the question is from Richard. How do I get Amazon to link the ebook and paperback when I'm publishing a hardcover through Ingram Spark?
Oh, this is the most annoying thing ever. And there's one of two answers. The first most annoying answer is that you can't. It will either do it or it won't do it. So you can try and make sure that the metadata matches absolutely exactly, including spaces, including brackets, including putting the right pieces of titles and metadata into the right boxes. So that's the first thing that you can do. And sometimes when you do that, it will naturally align. The other problem, or the other thing that you can do is that you can ask Amazon to connect them. And depending on who you get, they will either say yes or no. So I have got books that have connected and books that have not, because it says that they don't align them because it's an external publisher, even though it's quite clearly the same book, even though, all the metadata is the same. And then sometimes you can ask 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 12 times, and eventually the 13th person will go, yeah, okay, I'll do it. So there is no real easy answer to that, I'm afraid.
It's unfortunate because I published a series in hardcover, and it's still not linked. I think the best thing you can do, there's no good answer, unfortunately. I wish there was a better answer. The best thing you can do is just make sure that you let people know on your website that it's available in hardcover. And if you're giving out a link tree or, a books to read link or something like that, just make sure that you enumerate all the different formats. So make sure you update your books to read link with the hardcover, for example. I would do all of that and just hope and pray. And every night before you go to bed, light a candle and just pray that KDP and Ingram will one day learn to live in peace and work together. But until then, we're stuck. We are stuck. So, okay. Well, that is our final question. That wraps up another Q&A session. Thanks for hanging out with me, Sacha. And thank you, everybody, for hanging out. And we will be back next month.
You.
This has been Self-Publishing with ALLi Member Q&A podcast, where we answer your most burning self-publishing questions. Remember that if you are an ALLi member, you can submit your question by logging into your dashboard at allianceindependentauthors.org and going into the menu. You can submit your question, and you just might hear it on the air. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next month. Bye.
You've been listening to the Ask ALLi Members Q&A with Michael Ronn and Sacha Black. Our Members Q&A podcast stream is proudly sponsored by Book Vault. Sell high-quality print-on-demand books directly to readers worldwide and earn maximum royalty selling directly. Automate fulfillment and create stunning special editions with Book Vault Bespoke. Visit bookvault.app today for an instant quote. Our weekly self-publishing advice podcast is produced by ALLi, the Alliance of Independent Authors. Find more author advice, tips, and tools at our Self-Publishing Advice Center, selfpublishingadvice.org. And if you haven't already, we invite you to join our organization and become a self-publishing ally. You can do that at allianceindependentauthors.org. Now, what are you waiting for? Go write and publish.